沧海一声笑，滔滔灭共潮。沧海一声笑，滔滔灭共潮。四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，拔剑斩红腰，狼杀淘尽怒百笑。整整70年，他把中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟邪灵恶党，甚至都阳光普照。江山笑，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑险如潮。盘古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是这压死磕，中方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显祖国，照亮东方的天。戳破光辉的火焰，我准备了3世祖业，越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多雄剑，我们不忘世上虚度。清风笑，收归正道。一周踏浪自逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高。仰天长啸，知英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我定报 The voice of people the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action, take down the system. Take down, action, take down the system. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
Good evening, Fringers. It is Friday, April 16th, 2021. Happy Friday to everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to episode 28 of The Fringe. I am your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in Chinese and English on gtv.org, MOS Talk, every Tuesday and Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We are honored and we thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we appreciate your patronage. Please, if you haven't, spread the word about our show to all of your family and your friends and your social network contacts, and subscribe and follow us at gtv.org at MOS Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce and welcome tonight's co-host, who is our regular Friday night co-host extraordinaire, Ada. Welcome to the show, Ada. As always, it's so great to have you with me.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your warm welcome. It's been another eventful week of peaceful protests by our GTV investors in both DC and in New York City. The investors' tireless consistency have caught the attention of many passerby. And we actually have a clip from today's interview with a lawyer from DC, and he was passing by last Wednesday when he saw our peaceful protesters outside of SEC in Washington, DC. And today we had the honor of interviewing him, and he also raised a few very good questions. So if Chris could roll that clip, that would be great. Thank you.
We're so honored to have you here in our studio that's just on GTV, and we're very happy that you stopped by to learn a little bit more about why we're protesting. So what we wanted to ask is whether or not you know anything about the CCP's infiltration with SEC, or if you know why we're all standing outside of SEC right now.
So the first question, no, I do not know anything about the CCP's infiltration with the SEC. But as to the second question, I have learned a little bit as to why people are out here. It's been, fairly broad stories. It's the idea that the CCP, that the SEC has, quote, colluded with the CCP, and this has resulted in large delays in terms of getting GTV listed on a stock exchange. And so that's why people are out here frustrated.
Right. And do you happen to know anything about GTV as a media platform, or have you heard of it before our protests right now?
So before the protest, I heard nothing about it, but I have been told it's effectively just a media platform. So it's not, it's just selling information and speech, basically, but sometimes that becomes a problem here.
Right, exactly. And I just have another question, and that's the fact that in terms of us or our investors in GTV out there today, do you believe that? And
hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I understand. I hear the siren.
Okay, I think it is past. I'm sorry.
No worries at all.
Okay, so about the
investors. And in terms of our investors being standing outside of SEC today, do you believe that they deserve some sort of transparency? Especially, I'm sure you've heard that the reason they're standing outside is that they've not received any sort of information as to why we're being denied, or not actually being denied, but why we have not passed as a media platform that is only a free speech platform, just like Parler, just like all of the media platforms out there, and why it is that we've actually not been passed, but just been delayed for so long. Do you believe that these investors deserve a disclosure?
I think I heard all the question there.
Yes.
So yeah, on the face of it, it seems like this is a pretty simple operation. GTV is. Again, it's just a media platform, and it's selling nothing but ideas and words, and that seems like that should be nothing of a problem in a country that has the freedom of speech ingrained into its constitution and government.
Right.
That's what you would hope.
that's exactly that's why these investors invested in GTV, because a lot of our investors actually came from China when the CCP was in office. And with that being said, they really come to GTV to find news and to find different kind of information that is often censored in China just based off of the CCP's interruption. So this is why so many investors find this opportunity so amazing to invest in, because they're not just investing in a media platform, but they're also investing in a free speech platform that they can receive information that is not tainted.
Yeah.
And also, we were actually the first platform to really disclose that the virus it's transmittable between human to human back in 2020, January 19th. And since then, we now know that COVID-19 is definitely transmittable between person to person. And I hope that you can learn but I hope that you can support a platform like this, because it's so important for us to gain support here in America as well, since we are an America-based platform in general.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of freedom of speech, so I'm on board with that.
And it's so wonderful for us to hear that, and so refreshing as well, since often it's, especially with the uprising of Asian hate, it's often seen that a lot of Asian voices are being minimized because of our relation with China, which is where the virus was first found. So since the virus, do you think the uprising of Asian hate has definitely gone up, or do you think that has nothing to do with the virus?
I don't know, honestly. So, I mean, I've heard stories of increased Asian hate across the country, and the videos I show definitely, yeah, I suppose they do speak to that. Whether or not it's been the same since it was before COVID, I honestly don't know. Like a lot of the looting, for example, and beating that you see in major cities, I feel like that's been going on for a while, even before COVID. Whether or not that's been like particularly targeted like as like a race thing, I'm not so sure. As opposed to like, you know, some groups view Asians as stereotypically like more meek and submissive, but obviously you can see here that's not accurate.
That's right. And this is something that actually was encouraged because of GTV, because like you said, a lot of people view Asian as a community as being more submissive and just a easier and weaker target as a whole. But that's also because in the past, a lot of people were under the ruling of the CCP, so we were never given the voice, and we were never really given the opportunity to voice our opinions and voice our concerns, which is why them being out here today peacefully, all of the investors, is a big step forward for us as a community and for this platform as a whole. Do you have any final thoughts? And thank you for your time today, but do you have any final thoughts as to the protest right now, or any final thoughts as to the continuation of freedom of speech through this platform, or anything?
How about a question? Is a question okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Do you think the U.S. is becoming more like China if the U.S. is shutting down free speech like this?
I think that, first of all, that's a great question. And I feel like that is why our investors are out there today, because we're afraid that the country that so many people has run to seek new opportunities and to seek freedom of speech is becoming more like the country we ran away from. So that's why we're trying to warn all of our American audience out there and warn what is going to happen, what may happen if we don't protect our freedom of speech and our rights right now, because it's only a downhill ride from here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you guys are all doing great work by being out here. I really do.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for accepting this interview.
That was a great interview, Ada. And I think the most important thing was probably at the end, not that any of your questions weren't important, but when he asked, "Do you think that the freedom of speech is being affected in the United States?" And it is, and we know it is. We've talked about this many, many times before. We are headed toward the way of communism. There's no doubt about it. We have every so often the ebb and flow of our history has people saying there's a new form of socialism that's going to be awesome, and on paper it looks amazing, and it ends up being the biggest failure ever. And that's why we never go the socialist route. We have these young people in office that are just, that have their heads up their butts and know nothing about socialism, like Andrea Ocasio-Cortez and the squad, and Kamala Harris, the vice president, who have socialist agendas. And that's what happens when you start following the socialists. You start losing your freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, and everything else falls apart, and you all of a sudden don't have any rights at all anymore, and you end up like China. And that was a great question by him. Really, it was.
Really was. And I think it's a concern that we hope more people would raise, because it's a serious concern for people here on GTV as a platform, because we're trying to prevent this history from repeating itself. We're trying to prevent a communist government and a communist ruling, which is why it was so wonderful that he raised that question for me as well.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing is, Ada's showing everybody out there, fringers out there, Ada showed a video of a gentleman who is a lawyer who stopped by the DC protest today to talk to Ada about what was going on and what they were doing there. And what we must remember is, with this protest, at the base of all of it is our ability to give the Chinese people in China the freedom of speech and the freedom of news that they don't have there. They don't have the ability to know the truth, and that's what GTV does. And that's the tragedy of all of this, is that we're just trying to do something good for the people of China and all over the world to give them the news. We say it on my show, Truth, Integrity, Commitment. Truth, integrity, and commitment. That's my motto, and that's what we're all about. So real quick, I just want to show you what I did today, Ada. There's a clip of me at the rally and the protest outside of the SEC in New York City. Chris, if you want to roll that one for us, please.
SEC loves CCP. 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 SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, meet in court. SEC, meet in court. SEC, love CCP. SEC, love CCP. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, meet in court. SEC, meet in court. SEC, love CCP. 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 SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, meet in court. SEC, meet in court. SEC, meet in court. SEC, meet in court. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC, shame on you. SEC loves CCP. 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 SEC loves CCP.
Good job! Good job! Good job!
SEC loves CCP. 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 SEC loves CCP.
Good!
So, as you all can tell,
I didn't even know you had this side into, because On the show, we see David in a suit and tie every week, and here he is in the front lines trying to be, being an amazing leader and leading the whole team. That was amazing.
Yeah, I got some lungs. Someone said, "Wow, you got some lungs." Yeah, I mean, if it's something you believe in, which I do, it's easy to get the crowd stirred up and get them riled up. We're not there, obviously, to cause any harm to anybody, but just to get people fired up. It was cold out there, Aid. It was like 35 degrees out there, and I was like, just time to just try to kick this thing off. And I'm always surprised at the reaction when I do stuff like that. I don't really expect it, but people are like giving me high fives and fist bumps, and I'm just there doing what I believe in, and I always laughed. I kind of, to be honest, I'm gonna be really honest with you. My wife will come, oh, I protested. It's so you're tired from protesting? Come on. But I'm telling you what, it is brutal, especially where we're located. Wind coming off the Hudson takes it down 10 degrees. We're blocked by buildings. The Freedom Tower's right there. We got sun for like 5 minutes a day. Even if it's 70 degrees, it feels like 50. So, if it's rainy sometimes, it's cold sometimes. But in the end, when you're sitting at home and you're warm afterwards, you feel like you got something done, and that's what feels really good about the whole thing. And it's good to stay fired up. It keeps you warm on the inside and the outside. So it's definitely worth it. Absolutely, without a doubt.
100%. And it's so great to see you also, standing with our freedom fighters out there, preventing tragedies from reoccurring, and asking the SEC to give us an answer.
Yeah, every single person out there is an investor, and they want answers, and that's right. And what's going on right now is a tragedy. It's an American company, and it's being treated like a third world country. It's unbelievable, and it's not fair. And hopefully people are listening. I've heard speculation that lawyers are talking with each other. And I think this movement is strong, and things will get taken care of, and things will get done. We just got to keep showing up and keep doing it. Don't be afraid to come out there in the cold. Everybody does it. I've seen everybody from the age of 18 to 88 out there doing it. So if it's something you believe in, definitely, don't be afraid to show your support for this very, very important cause. Okay, we have a really, really, really big show tonight, so we have to move on. We didn't expect to do that in the beginning, but Ada and I are so deeply involved with this that we had to show that, and like I did on Tuesday with Isla. But now we have to move on to breaking news. So the first slide I want to show you is our first video. I'm sorry. We had our intelligence officials meet with the Senate committee, and what they're saying is our intelligence, the National Intelligence Advisor, Avril Haines, is saying that China and Russia pose the greatest threat to the U.S., which we probably already knew. But let's roll that, please, Chris. Thanks.
The Senate Intelligence Committee held a public hearing Wednesday to discuss the dangers facing the U.S. from around the globe. This week, the government released its annual assessment of worldwide threats. The report broke down the intelligence community's biggest concerns related to geopolitical competition, domestic extremism, and the impact of the pandemic on humanitarian and economic crises. At Wednesday's hearing, the Director of National Intelligence said China and Russia present the most serious risk of undermining the U.S. But when it comes to terrorism, Director Avril Haines said the most pressing danger comes from home.
With regard to global terrorism, ISIS and al-Qaeda remain the most pressing threats to U.S. interests overseas, as was noted. These groups seek to conduct attacks inside the United States, but sustained counterterrorism pressure has broadly degraded their capabilities. Domestically, lone actors and small cells with a broad range of ideological motivations pose a greater immediate threat. We see this threat manifest itself in individuals who are inspired by al-Qaeda and ISIS, often called homegrown violent extremism, and those who commit terrorist acts for ideological goals stemming from other influences, such as racial bias and anti-governmental sentiment, which we refer to as domestic violent extremism.
For more on this, let's bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis. Hi there, Olivia. So Director Haines said that U.S. counterterrorism efforts have suppressed the global terror threat. How might the drawdown in Afghanistan impact that?
Well, Elaine, it was striking that just hours before President Biden announced that he intended to draw down U.S. forces in Afghanistan by September 11, his own CIA director, William Burns, said bluntly at this hearing that following that drawdown, the government's ability to collect on and to act on threats will diminish. That's simply a fact, he said. And he acknowledged that there is a significant risk of a resurgence in terrorist activity. But he caveated that with two important qualifications. One, he said that the threat from ISIS and al-Qaeda, as the DNI clip that you showed also said, after years of counterterrorism pressure, was diminished to the point that neither one of those groups can any longer carry out a threat on the homeland. They want to regain that capacity, and they're working towards it, but aren't currently able to do so. That's a meaningful assessment from the leader of an agency that has spent almost 2 decades squarely focused on this very issue. Burns also said that even after withdrawal, the CIA was going to retain a, quote, suite of capabilities, some existing, some new, that are going to help the U.S. anticipate and contest any rebuilding effort by extremists. So in sum, it's hard to say whether or how significant a resurgence we can expect to see. The director himself said that there are too many variables to know that at this stage. But what the intelligence community is saying is the threat is diminished to the point that it can't reach us here right now. We'll have a diminished capacity to monitor it, but we will monitor it. And if it becomes necessary, we're going to help the U.S. or its partners take action, again, if it becomes necessary.
Well, on Tuesday, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced the U.S. will send 500 more troops to Germany, just as Russian forces are building along its shared border with Ukraine. How is U.S. intelligence approaching Russia's actions?
So this is an intriguing and a repeated question that you've heard asked by lawmakers and by journalists alike, is what are Putin's intentions here? Is it military action? Is it a stunt? Is it to distract from domestic trials at home? There's no doubt that the intelligence community has an assessment on this issue as to what his intentions are, but the director was clearly not willing to go there in an unclassified setting today. What he did say was that the buildup was of great concern, of course, and that he had learned over the course of his career, which includes some years spent as the ambassador to Russia, never to underestimate the ability of Vladimir Putin and of the Russian leadership to throw its weight around. So what he said this could be is signaling on Putin's part, trying to intimidate Ukrainian leadership or to send a message to the new U.S. administration that he's not to be trifled with. Most strikingly, both he and the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Scott Barrier, said that the Russians have already laid some groundwork that would permit them to engage in a limited military incursion or an objective strike. That's something that Burns said President Biden expressed serious concerns about on the phone with President Putin yesterday.
Interesting. Well, following the recent SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange cyber intrusions, what kind of picture is the intel community painting about cyber threats?
This got a lot of attention today, and it's coming from a committee that's pretty savvy on these topics. They're steeped in it, having had hearings on social media, on election interference, and more recently on the fallout from the SolarWinds intrusion attributed to Russia. What they heard from the NSA director, General Paul Nakasone, today was more about the reasons why he's limited in what he can see domestically. So the NSA's ambit is overseas surveillance, figuring out what other adversaries are saying and preparing to do. And there are U.S. laws and policies in place that prevent them from looking inward. He was very clear. He did not want expanded authorities for either the NSA or Cyber Command, which he also leads. The NSA learned a pretty tough lesson a few years ago about domestic surveillance, so he does not want those authorities. But he said that adversaries know what those limitations are, and so they're increasingly structuring their attacks to exploit those legal and policy boundaries. They know exactly how long it takes the FBI to get and act on a warrant, so they're sort of tailoring their attacks to fit within that window and disappear within that time frame. They're also, he said, faster, broader, more sophisticated. They're not using simple tactics like spear phishing or guessing passwords. They're using supply chain vulnerabilities. They're using exploits. These are higher tier activities that he said had made the U.S. stand up and take notice. This is definitely going to be a massive and ongoing challenge, not only for the intelligence community, but for the U.S. government writ large.
Yeah, it's alarming to hear that, but so important that people are kept aware of the nature of these kinds of threats. Olivia Gazis for us. Olivia, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine.
Wow, we got a lot to take apart with this one, Ada. Basically, what's happening here is we know from Tuesday's show, Isla and I talked about how there's this axis of evil forming, and it's China, Russia, and Iran with some other countries, probably North Korea and Myanmar. The military troops from Myanmar and their leaders getting involved. But we need to keep an eye out with what's going on, especially in the intelligence community. And one thing I don't agree with that Avril Haines had to say that didn't seem very intelligent to me was we need to worry about domestic threats of terrorism more than international threats. I don't believe that at all. Because if you start ignoring what's happening overseas, and she even said that what we should do is not pay, and it sounded like this too, not pay so much attention to Afghanistan and what's going on, and it almost, and I'm right in the middle of where 9/11 happened. Like, we shouldn't pay as much attention to that kind of threat anymore and focus more on internal threats amongst ourselves. That sounds like someone that's trying to divide a nation further than it's already divided, and that's the last thing we need from an intelligence official. Not a very intelligent statement by her. We need to focus on this axis of evil that's forming overseas. At least they're objectively looking at things and seeing that there is some cyber security issues going on with Russia. Again, they're getting very, like she said, they're getting very intelligent with this, and they are able to access our servers and get out really quick before we even notice it. So it's something that's very difficult to keep up with, and it's something we need to keep up with, or we're going to find ourselves painted in a corner again. And that's kind of what this show's all about. Is the USA going to stand strong against these threats? And we have a president right now and a vice president that I don't have a whole lot of confidence in. They talked about how Biden was on the phone with Putin. I'd love to be a fly on the wall to hear that phone conversation, Ada. I mean, come on. Like, the guy, but I have no faith in Biden at all. I would really, really love to hear what he had to say to Putin and Putin had to say to him. One thing about keeping the peace between two countries that are definitely at odds with each other, and we're talking about the U.S. and China, the U.S. and Iran, the U.S. and Russia, is you don't need to become great friends with them. You just need to keep them in check. You know how that old saying goes, Ada, keep your friends close and keep your enemies even closer. That's what we need to do here. Counterintelligence is providing that. Hopefully we can follow through with that and protect ourselves, because that's what this is really all about, where we end up in the whole mix as Americans. And we need to take the focus off of domestic terrorism, which I think is something that's over-exaggerated, to take the focus away from what's really happening overseas and to focus more on what is really happening overseas. And that's that axis of evil getting together. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, Ada.
With the U.S., it's really a matter of, with great power comes great responsibility. So the U.S. really does have the responsibility to keep their enemies in check, like David said. And also, the U.S. is right now on rocky grounds with all three of the axes of evil, the main ones, with all three, Iran, China, and Russia at the moment. So that is definitely not a great position for the United States, even though the United States, with Biden, is strategically creating and forming allies with countries in the EU and Australia, and with talk in New Zealand as well. However, we need to see the U.S. really stand up for themselves and not turn all of their issues inwards, having domestic terrorism even be a thing of their worry. Because at the moment, we know that what everybody's worried about, or what the MSM is portraying, is that the biggest threat is BLM or is AAPI community and the people who are trying to spread hate. However, that really is not the biggest threat for the country at the moment, because the biggest threat, as we all know, is the biological weapon, which is COVID-19. And that we know exactly where it came from. So that is actually our biggest threat. That is killing more people than any war at the moment, because we know exactly where it came from. And that's what the US should be talking about. And in terms of cyber threats, it's a big deal that China has Huawei, which has created the 5G. With that, the US has always been a little skeptical with the use of 5G and the hacking of systems in the US, including our security system. And that's why the US has banned Huawei, and a lot of EU countries has too, which is the benefit of creating allies. but that is something that the U.S. should definitely also keep an eye on, as that is being exploited and being used more in many different countries at the moment. David.
Yeah, these are some really testy times right now. We're looking at, we're basically looking at, like I said, Ada, we're looking at other countries getting together and forming this alliance, this axis of evil against us, and we have a lot of work to do. And to be honest with you, I don't, again, have a lot of confidence that this president has the stamina, emotionally, physically, or mentally, to keep up with this. It scares me, to be honest with you. I felt really secure when Trump was in office. Obviously, they're going to point this domestic terrorism thing toward Trump and what happened on, at the Capitol. I had a feeling she was kind of leaning toward that happening, which, to me wasn't an act of domestic terrorism. That's how they painted it. Like you said, the MSM has their way of lying and making things look like something that it's not. But something to definitely keep an eye on, something we'll definitely be talking about later. I'd like to move on to our second video now. This is China warning Biden to stay out of Taiwan. Let's roll that one, please.
China, meanwhile, has accused the United States of damaging the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait. Beijing has said that it opposes any official U.S.-Taiwan talks. This is senior former U.S. officials have arrived in Taipei for a trip to signal President Joe Biden's commitment to Taiwan and also to its democracy. The former U.S. Senator Chris Dodd and former Deputy Secretaries of the State Richard Armitage and James Steinberg arrived in Taiwan on a trip that has angered Beijing. The three arrived in an unmarked private jet that landed at the Taipei International Airport. The former U.S. officials were met off the aircraft by Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu and also the top U.S. diplomat in Taipei, Brent Christensen. They are now due to meet Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen on Thursday, even as the former U.S. officials landed in Taipei. Beijing has issued a warning to America. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has urged the Americans to observe the One China principle to avoid further damaging the peace and stability of the Taiwan Straits.
China firmly opposes any type of official contacts between the US and Taiwan. This is China's clear and consistent position. China has already made stern representations to the US side over its sending of personnel to Taiwan.
China has also urged the United States to not send any mistaken signals to what Beijing calls as Taiwan's independence separatist forces to avoid further damaging the US-China relations.
With President Tsai and of our trip.
We urge the US to truly observe the One China principle and the three communiques and immediately stop any type of official contact between the US and Taiwan, cautiously deal with the issues related to Taiwan and not send any mistaken signals to Taiwan independent separatist forces to avoid further damaging US-China relations and the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait.
The tensions have soared in the Taiwan Strait in recent days. On Monday, 25 Chinese Air Force aircrafts, including fighter jets and nuclear-capable bombers, had entered in Taiwan's air defense identification zone. This was the largest such incursion reported by Taipei so far. China termed the incursion by its Air Force jets as a combat drill. It is important to note that the U.S. Navy regularly conducts freedom of navigation exercises in the Taiwanese Straits. Earlier, Washington had issued guidelines that will enable U.S. officials to meet more freely with officials from Taiwan. And this was a step by the Biden administration to show U.S. support for Taiwan's democracy. And the move has angered China, which considers the territory as its own following the Biden administration's move. China has advised America to, quote-unquote, not play with fire. Despite the standoff over Taiwan, engagement between the United States and the Chinese administration will continue on issues such as climate change. The China's special climate envoy will be meeting with his U.S. counterpart John Kerry in Shanghai sometime later this week and will also exchange views on key United Nations climate conference. John Kerry will be seeking to find common ground on climate change with China, and the two will be exchanging views on COP26, which is the United Nations 2021 climate change conference to be held in Scotland in the month of November.
应中方邀请，美国总统
Following China's invitation, the special climate envoy for the US President John Kerry will visit China from April 14th to 17th. During this time, China's special climate envoy Zhai Zhenhua will hold meetings with Kerry in Shanghai and will exchange views on issues including US-China cooperation on climate change and the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference.
That climate change thing at the end there was kind of an afterthought. We'll get to that later. That whole thing is a joke to me, to be honest with you. But what we really need to focus on here, and what's really important, and I want all my fringers out there to listen. Most of my Chinese listeners probably know this, but maybe our American friends don't. Our fringers that are American out there, what's happening right now between China and Taiwan? They're talking about could possibly be the spark that ignites World War III. That's how serious this is. This is China saying to the U.S., do not interfere with Taiwan, when the U.S. already has something in place that they protect Taiwan during things like this instability, which is what's happening. China is accusing the U.S. of interfering with Taiwan and damaging peace and stability. Now listen to how silly that is. That China, the CCP, is accusing the U.S. of interfering. Yet China is the one that's flying 25 jets over top of Taiwan in the South China Sea to bully them around, basically, and say, you belong to us, we're going to control you. This is what we're talking about here on The Fringe, and this is why GTV exists, to bring you the truth. This is absolute farce, a farcity that the Chinese would even say this, because the fact that they're doing this and then saying we're interfering is the most ridiculous. And that's the side that you don't get to hear, is our side, the truth. And, China's calling this a combat drill. Yeah, it's a combat drill against Taiwan. That's why they're doing it. They're practicing for when they do attack Taiwan. And that's what this is all leading up to. This is a powder keg that's about to explode, Ada, and it's scary. And this is why we got to keep an eye on China, what they're doing with Russia, why they're talking to Iran and amping up this nuclear building that they're doing with Iran. And the other thing is, China's urging Biden to observe the one China policy. And I think you're going to talk about that in a little bit. And again, China is opposing any contact between Taiwan and the U.S., and that's where the real problem begins. And again, what this episode is about, will we stand strong? We're talking the talk, but are we going to walk the walk? This is kind of carrying over from the Tuesday episode. I'm curious to see if Biden's really going to follow through. Obviously, you don't want to put your own country at risk by saying, if we interfere with, China and their dealings with Taiwan, is it going to cause a war that's going to, spread throughout the world and eventually reach us? So this is a hot topic, though, right now. And it's something that I think Biden needs to stand strong by. Don't be afraid of the CCP. I've said it on Tuesday. There's a lot of times where they talk the talk and don't walk the walk. Is the CCP really that stupid that they're going to try to they're interfering with us. Are they going to try to start something with us? I don't know how powerful they think they are, but we are definitely more powerful. We're still the most powerful nation in the world. We have, our hearts go out to those people that live in China. But I'm telling you something, if the CCP is messing with the wrong country here. What are your thoughts on all that, Ada?
I understand what you've been saying, David, and the only leverage that the CCP has against the U.S. is their BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. That is something that they're holding dearly to them, and that's why they're trying to reach out to Myanmar and all of these countries along the way, so that they can be an ally and of use to their plan to take over the world, essentially. And the one China policy, well, Taiwan has been treated as their own nation for decades now. And to interfere with the U.S.'s relationship with Taiwan is not something that the CCP gets to say anymore. And we know that this is because the CCP is trying to turn Taiwan into the second Hong Kong. And that is exactly what Taiwan is trying to avoid right now. The CCP is trying to scare not only Taiwan, but the US as well, just to back off from their dealings with this one China policy. However, the US has more leverage, especially at the end when it came to climate change, because we do not want to see China and the US working together to deal with climate change, because we know that China or the CCP is the last ones to talk about climate change, as they have been one of the biggest industrial countries in the world for many years now, especially with the factories and the production. Especially right now, actually, in the north of China, they're experiencing a huge sandstorm, and that's all coming from their messings with climate change as a whole. And with that being said, the US is better off working with countries such as Japan, where they share the same initiative and they share the same idea and viewpoint for climate change. And that's probably what we want to see more of, them working together, where the US working together with countries who think alike against powers like China to prevent them bullying.
Yeah, well, you know what? Now that we're talking about it a little bit, we will be covering the climate change scam, as I call it, in the future.
Yes,
There's no you made a good point about it. China is building more and more and more factories and industrializing their nation more and more to get more out there. And China does not care at all about climate change. They could care less about it. And it's a big joke to them. Kerry, in this whole climate, every time I hear the words climate change, I shudder. It's like the most ridiculous concept and ideology ever. I understand that we want to try to be careful about emissions and things like that. There's so much that goes into it, though, and we'll cover that in another episode, and I'll explain why it's ridiculous. But we do need to move on. We certainly won't drop the climate change issue, and we'll explain to you in a future episode why climate change is just a cover for something else bigger that's really happening. And moving on, we'd like to talk about next is actually how the U.S. is standing up to Russia, and we're planning on slapping some sanctions on them, or we already have. And let's roll that one, please, Chris. Thanks.
The U.S. plans to retaliate against Russia with sanctions as early as Thursday for alleged election interference and malicious cyber activity. That's according to sources familiar with the matter. The announcement would further chill relations between Washington and Moscow, which has tested Western powers' patience with a military buildup near Ukraine. One source says some 30 entities are expected to be blacklisted, and 10 Russian officials may be expelled from the United States. Another source says Washington is expected to introduce aggressive new measures targeting Russia's sovereign debt, which could restrict their access to American financial markets. The White House, the State Department, and the Treasury did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The wide-ranging sanctions would come partly in response to the SolarWinds software cybersecurity breach, which the U.S. has said was likely orchestrated by Russia, giving hackers access to thousands of companies and government offices. Washington also intends to punish Moscow for alleged interference in the 2020 U.S. presidential election and reports that Russia offered Taliban militants bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan. U.S. President Joe Biden, who called Russian President Vladimir Putin a killer last month, told Putin on Tuesday that the U.S. would act firmly to defend its interests in response to those actions, according to U.S. officials' account of the call. Biden also proposed a meeting with Putin in a third country that would allow the leaders to find areas to work together.
Well, that's certainly positive that, the end note there that they would be willing to, while Biden was reaching out a olive branch of peace to Putin to say, hey, let's meet in another, a neutral country and talk about things and try to hash things out. That's really what needs to happen, because we already know that China, Russia, and Iran are doing their, axis of evil things. So maybe Biden's trying to reach out and do his thing to keep things, to keep things calm between us and other nations that don't like us, basically. again, we talked about this earlier. The cyber activities, the malicious activities, with cyber security from Russia, the supposed election interference in 2020. 30 entities have been blacklisted. They didn't name all 30, and I'm not sure what they are, to be honest with you, but we can cover that in a later episode. 10 Russian officials also would be expelled from the U.S., and Russia will be restricted access to the U.S. financial market. You know what it sounds like to me, Ada? We should be doing this to the CCP, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we? It sounds like we're decoupling from Russia. Shouldn't we be decoupling from China first?
Okay. That is 100% what we should be doing. And it's actually great to see Biden reaching out to Putin and trying to establish some sort of common ground. And we hope that common ground is against the CCP, because these two powerhouses working together would definitely hit CCP where it hurts.
Yeah, it's almost like a tug of war. They're like kind of vying, when you're playing pickup basketball, they're like, I want this guy, I don't want that guy. It sounds like almost like, Biden knows, everybody knows, you better know what's going on over there with the axis of evil. So, hey, you know what? Maybe we can try to get him on our side instead, and let's try not to have this war happen. But of course, the problem is that the left, Democrats are so, the left is so, the last time we had a war was during a Democratic presidency, during the reign of a Democratic president. That's what they do. We go to war with Democratic presidents, and a Republican president comes in and cleans everything up. That's like the ebb and flow of everything. But when you're talking about three powerhouses like China, Russia, and Iran, and going to war against them, that's a bird of a different feather. I mean, that's something that we really need to focus on and make sure that doesn't happen. And again, I think, there's some push and pull going on here, Ada. We're talking about, it sounds like they're trying to decouple from Russia, but at the same time, he's trying to reach out, like I said, with an olive branch apiece. And I want to talk to you, Putin, about a couple things first and figure this out and figure that out. Mm-hmm. These are some strong stances against Russia. But again, I think Iran, and I think Xi Jinping in China don't take us seriously anyway. They almost like they're just playing around with, toying around with Biden just to see what they can get away with. And they see everything. They do. Our news covers it. The president tripping up a pair, stairs, climbing up to the plane. He's fumbling over his own words. Looks like he falls asleep when he's talking. He barely talks to the American people. He gets completely lost in his train of thought. They see all that. This guy's supposed to be the leader of the free world. He's supposed to be the leader of the most powerful country in the world, and we should be very worried about that. Again, these are strong stances that he's taken, but will he walk the walk? We'll have to wait and see.
That's right. But we're also seeing too much interference with our cyber information, and especially those information that are especially important to our country right now. And just like we were talking about covering in the very beginning of this episode with SEC, we see a lot of information being sold, and those are also problems that we face as well internally because of all the information that's getting leaked out of our security system. And that is also why the U.S. should, work together and reinforce that to make sure nothing's getting leaked, and definitely decouple with any cyber companies that are trying to purge any information from the country.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we're running low on time here. We got to get into the next segment here real quick. So Vice President Kamala Harris, who I affectionately call Cackling Kamala, breaks a 21-day silence about the border crisis. Let's roll that video, Chris.
Now today, President Biden's border czar, Kamala Harris, broke her 21-day silence on the issue.
I have talked with the president of Mexico, the president of Guatemala. We have, well, I'm probably saying too much, but we have plans in the work to go to Guatemala as soon as possible, given all of the restrictions in terms of COVID and things of that nature.
So she's going to visit Mexico and Guatemala eventually, but not the U.S. southern border and not the children in cages. They'll just have to wait. Joining me now to discuss, Tommy Lahren, host of No Interruption on Fox Nation, and Fox News contributor, Richard Fowler. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Tommy, I want to go to you first. You just came from the border. Did you run into our vice president when you were there?
You know, she must have been in camouflage because I did not see her there. But I'll tell you this, I'm happy that she plans to visit Mexico and Guatemala at some point to see the root causes of why people are coming over here. But I can tell her exactly why people are coming over here. It is her administration, the Biden administration, that has issued that cattle call for people to come over. And the root causes of people coming over and the reason that their countries are so messed up in the first place is because these illegal immigrants are paying cartel and criminal organizations thousands and thousands of dollars to be traipsed into our country illegally, thus funding the problems in those home countries. So if you don't stop the cattle call, if you don't apply consequences, it's never going to end. These countries that they're coming from are never going to be repaired, and our country certainly will continue to come last, as it has for the entirety of this administration.
Richard, what do you think about that? Because no matter where you stand on the immigration reform debate, you have to admit that the policies of Joe Biden and the rhetoric of Joe Biden caused this crisis.
No, I won't admit that because I don't think Joe Biden caused this crisis. This crisis has been decades in the making. Number one, let's take a jaunt down history lane and understand this. It's not cartels is the reason why folks are leaving this country. The reason why cartels exist is because of America's failed war on drugs, which Tony forgot to talk about, right? When we created a war on drugs in this country and we penalized folks for having possession of marijuana and other things, what we created was a black market, and that black market is where the cartels thrived. And when those cartels thrived, they also started importing people to the United States on our southern border. I'm happy to see Kamala Harris go to Mexico and Guatemala, but let's understand, Donald Trump had 4 years to quote-unquote fix the problems at the border, and he didn't.
So, let's talk about the facts, though, Richard.
Let's give them a chance to actually
I think there's a fair conversation to have about drugs crossing the border, if they should be legalized or anything. But the policy specifically, when you listen to other foreign leaders, like in Guatemala, they blame the former president. Take a look at this.
I believe in the first few weeks of the Biden administration, messages were confusing. There were compassionate messages that were understood by people in our country, especially the coyotes, to tell families, we'll take the children. The children can go in, and once the children are there, they will call their parents.
So, Tommy, you interview the people that are crossing the border. They say Joe Biden told us to come. When you talk to foreign leaders, they say the same thing. So who's right and who's wrong?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Richard, but it's really not up for discussion when you actually speak to migrants and you actually speak to Border Patrol who have spoken to these migrants and asking them why they're coming, and they say that Joe Biden sent me and told me I don't have to go home. It's pretty cut and dried exactly why they're coming. But I also want to push back against something that you said in your previous statement about how Trump was not solving the problem. No, Donald Trump was absolutely solving that problem. I was just down at the border. I've been to the border several times during the Trump administration. Let me finish. I was there during the Trump administration after he implemented those policies that remain in Mexico, after he sent the message that you have to wait in line on the Mexican side and get a number if you are indeed claiming asylum.
Tony, the problem goes away. The problem still exists today, which means Donald Trump didn't solve it.
Well, I'm going to hop in, guys, because we got to go. The problem is it exists because he got rid of some of the remaining Mexico agreements, and foreign leaders have said that. The people that are coming across the border are saying that. But it was a great debate to have you both on. Tommy, Richard, thanks so much.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so Richard Fowler, that's the guy that was in this, the gentleman in the debate. This right here is the exact reason why we have our show, so we can tell you that, I mean, you just need to listen to what this guy says to understand that everything he said was a complete, like, almost like he doesn't see reality. At the end there, right there, Ada, he says, if Trump would have fixed the problem, we wouldn't have a problem now, would we? That's what he kept saying at the end. Trump did fix the problem. The problem was that Joe Biden signed an executive order to stop the building of the wall. Why did you see that, Ada? Did you see him say that? Yes. That made me furious. I was like, is this guy even listening to what he's saying? If Trump would have fixed the problem, there wouldn't be a problem, would there? Yes, he did fix the problem, and there wasn't a problem until Joe Biden signed an executive order saying, stop building that wall, and then he invited immigrants to come to this country by the thousands without any kind of repercussion whatsoever. They were jumping over walls. They were going around the wall. I just can't. That's what we're talking about right there. I don't understand why these people are even allowed to talk on TV when they don't even really listen to what they're saying, the words coming out of their own mouths. He fixed the problem. Joe Biden is the one that didn't. And the other thing that he said that I didn't realize before until I saw it this time was he talked about how he was defending Kamala Harris in this marijuana thing. Kamala Harris arrested hundreds and hundreds, I think it might have been thousands of black people for little bits of marijuana possession. And he's defending her for that, basically saying that it was okay, that the reason for for all this marijuana to come into the country was because of the drug cartels. And Kamala's doing the right thing by going to Guatemala. Kamala's going to Guatemala. She's not even going to the border to see what's going on there. I don't care. We already know what the source of the problem is, that these countries are third world countries that thrive on drug production and selling drugs to the United States, to people in the U.S. The problem is that Joe Biden said, come on in. That's the problem. He said, come on in. And he signed an executive order saying that they should stop the wall, stop, building the wall. That's the problem. And that is what I just can't understand, that this guy completely argued against his own statement and made completely false statements about what's really going on there at the border.
And that's the thing with MSM. They have not picked a side at all. When Trump was in office, they were unhappy with the border, and now they're even unhappier with the border and very unhappy with Harris's talk of going to Guatemala. Even talking about Guatemala, she said she's released too much information. However, I think quite the contrary. She's really released not enough information for people to understand how she's going to deal with the situation at the border right now. She's not even visited the border, which makes it even more concerning, as so many children are there in cages, as the host also talked about on Fox News. And not only that, we see that through this heated debate, it was, like David said, very ambiguous as to which side they're trying to take. They're trying to have the situation at the border be better, but how can it be better if it's not controlled? And right now it is definitely the opposite of being contained and controlled. So, gotta love free speech, huh? Like, there is no stance that is definite. People can wobble through the other side, and people can talk about their leaders. If anybody in China was caught talking about Xi, they would not be alive to talk about it anymore. And that is the very sad truth, and that is why so many people are trying to protect their own freedom of speech, not only in this country, but just for themselves as a human right process.
Yeah, that's correct. And this kind of segues into our last segment here too. And it's the Remain in Mexico policy, which was Joe Biden's getting sued for this. President Biden's getting sued by Texas and Missouri to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Remain in Mexico is basically Trump had this policy. And what you do is if you come to the border, you do all your paperwork, and then you stay in your country until all your paperwork passes, and then you come through. What they're doing now is they're kind of letting people in and let them go wherever, and then they don't show up for their court date, and they end up being illegal immigrants, and we end up paying taxes for them and supporting their lives, basically. That's why Trump instated the Remain in Mexico, to make everything's done legitimately. They can't come into our country until all the paperwork is cleared. You're allowed to come in eventually, but we want to make sure we do this legally. What was happening is thousands and hundreds of thousands of immigrants would come in. They disperse like they are now. They go into hiding and they never go back to their court date. And the next thing you know, we're paying for illegal immigrants to live here, basically. And then also that's why they're trying to pass this whole voting law where anybody can vote, including criminals and illegal immigrants. But that'll take us, like I said, into our last segments. Roll that video, please, Chris.
Welcome back. Texas and Missouri are suing the Biden administration for scrapping the Remain in Mexico policy, claiming the border surge is putting an unprecedented burden on state and federal resources. Join me live, one of the key players in that lawsuit, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Sir, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Good morning.
Good morning. So what do you think is going to come of this? What are you hoping comes of this lawsuit?
Well, we think this is one of the most effective immigration policies that Trump put in place. It was actually working very well by forcing these people to stay in Mexico, because everybody had figured out through immigration lawyers from America that they could come in, claim asylum, even though only about 14% ended up getting asylum. and then just disappear into the country. So this policy was actually working. Why Joe Biden decided to undo something so successful, I don't know, but we really believe that we will win in court and that this policy will be back in place.
Yeah, we'll certainly continue to follow that. You know, in the meantime, with each day that passes, you do wonder the threat long term, how much greater that threat is to our communities, not just along the border, but throughout the entire country because of specifically the infiltration of drugs that have come across the border.
Well, there's no doubt as the numbers increase, they're going to move out of Texas and the border states. Right now, we're taking the brunt of it. There are thousands of people here that weren't here just 2 months ago. And those people are going to start being moved around because we don't have enough places for them to stay. And so the rest of the country will start seeing, as time goes on, they'll start seeing the impact of higher crime rates, of COVID, the transmission of COVID and other diseases, and the issues with human trafficking and drug smuggling that we're seeing.
Are you disappointed that the president and vice president haven't visited the border yet? And have you spoken to them about it?
I have not spoken to them, but I'm extremely disappointed because I think it's one of the major issues of our time. Given their policy changes, the impact, I would expect them to go down to the border and start trying to understand the implications of what they're doing and how it's affecting Texans, and talk to people that are being affected, including the people that are on the border doing the work.
Now, let's talk about this because today Democrats are expected to unveil a bill that would expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. Let's take a listen to Joe Biden's stance on this. His stance is flip-flopped a little bit. Take a listen.
You'll know my opinion of court packing when the election is over. I'm not a fan of court packing.
You are open to expanding the court?
I'm open to considering what happens from that point on.
At the end of the day, what do you think ends up happening here, and how dangerous would this be?
Well, it looks purely political. I think most of the members of the court have expressed opinions on this. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said there's no reason to pack the court. It looks political. That body has been viewed as non-political. They're supposed to rule on the law. There's been no reason given for why they want to dissipate the current impact of the court. That seems to be the direction we're going. I certainly hope that we don't change things just for political reasons. So right now, that's what it looks like.
And real quick, you know, obviously it seems like the left would want to do this to help the left, right? But do you think ultimately, if this ended up happening, this could end up helping Republicans? Because we had Congressman Stubbe on earlier this morning who said, look, this could have an impact on the 2022 House races.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, it may be one of the main messages of the races coming up, and it may end up backfiring, which often happens when you do something this extreme.
Okay. Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General, thank you very much for joining us, and keep us updated on everything that's going on in your state. I know that what's going on at the border certainly impacts so many people down there, and they want to get some answers, and I know you do too. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, again, Ada, it's a huge mess at the border. It really is. And, you know, to kind of wrap everything up here, I'm not even sure how Biden would be able to handle our adversaries, our foreign adversaries, if he can't even take care of his own business at home. They're completely ignoring this border issue. You know, there's a threat to our own communities. It's putting America last again. And like this gentleman said, it's like we have drug dealers, drug smugglers infiltrating our country daily. You know what? There's another big problem. Something people probably don't think about is Americans stop using drugs. Stop using drugs. You wouldn't need drug smugglers. You know what I mean, Ada? I don't know. It's just kind of a funny way to look at it. Yeah, if you don't use drugs, don't need drug smugglers anyway. But drug dealers will still be out there. You know, it's a good point, right?
Yeah. But marijuana is actually legal now in the state of New York because Governor Cuomo is trying to get more people to like him again.
Well,
and that is a surprise.
We'll see how that works out. I don't think that's going to, you know, with the accusations against him. That's someone else we need to talk about soon in the future. But there's nowhere to put these people that are coming in. They're trying to make these laws now where you have to take an immigrant into your house and take care. Oh, my God, it's so ridiculous. Like I said, drug smuggling, human trafficking, COVID spreaders are just released all over the U.S. And, you know, they ended up this here with the court packing situation also, which kind of was an afterthought, like the environmental discussion we had with John Kerry. And that's that, you know, this is kind of showing you that Biden, you know, you can't trust him. And, you know, if he does, but the good thing is, like this gentleman said, that it could backfire also. the court packing, and I think in 2022 we will see a switch over. Republicans will regain the Senate and the House, hopefully, and start to get things more quelled and start taking care of business the way it should be taken care of. But right now, what we're dealing with, and the point of this was to show you of the mess that the U.S. is in right now, and Biden can't get it together. So how are we gonna stand tall again, Ada, against our adversaries when he can't even take care of business at home?
That's the thing, David. It's like leaving the door wide open. It's most important for him to really take care of his own citizens right now and protect the rights of Americans, and they should have. For example, investigating into the SEC that should stand for peace and should stand for unity. However, yet there are so many problems with outsiders coming into this country, and we understand that this is a free country and that people can immigrate here, but legally. We have to emphasize on the word legally, because we can't just leave the door open that way, especially with a virus like this. What if there's similar cases in the future? And with the fact that we have a vaccine being developed, that's positive. However, if similar cases happen in the future, we can't have the door open, and we cannot lose track of who is in the country right now.
Yeah, this whole thing just has me thinking, I wish we could just go forward in time and just have these 4 years be over so quickly, because right now we are in such a precarious situation with this president and his vice president, who basically laughs every time she's asked a question, because and there were psychiatrists actually diagnosing her, saying that the reason she does that is because she feels so uncomfortable about her answers and that she's not confident in herself, that she kind of laughs things off. This is the vice president of the most powerful country in the world, just laughing and cackling during the most inopportune times when there's so much going on in this country right now. Got a president who's a geriatric, a vice president who's a cackling hyena. And, and I'm saying this because I am a Republican, which everybody knows. I'm saying this because it's the truth. We are in a very precarious time in our nation right now, and the people that are leading this country should not be in office whatsoever, in my opinion. It is a very, very dangerous time for us, and we are in a lot of danger because the people that are in office now are doing the exact opposite of what 45 President Donald Trump did. He put us first. This administration is putting us last. They do not care about the citizens of this country and about what could be the outcome of our future. Could be very, very detrimental if they don't start stepping up to the plate. Like I said, Ada, I just wish this could all be over so quickly, and we just have to wait another, how many years until we get Mike Pompeo in office, right? Trump or Pompeo, I'll take both, either or, whatever. We got to get somebody in office who has a pair of cojones, you know what I mean? Because right now we're a joke to the rest of the world, and that's the truth.
We just need to see whoever is in office really stand up for Americans at the moment, especially when a lot of our rights, a lot of our information are getting leaked. It's so important to really stand up, stand strong, and tell the rest of the world that this country is still powerful, especially united together.
That's right. That's a good way to close it up here, Ada. I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'd like to thank you all for hanging out with us a little extra tonight. We did have a full show to pack in for you. We have so much more to cover. I probably, formulated 5 more shows in my head from what Ada and I just talked about tonight. But I appreciate your patronage. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Again, we are The Fringe, and we are on every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on gtv.org at MOS Talk.
Yes, and please keep an eye out on GTV for the SEC protests that are still going to go on for the rest of the week.
That's right. We'll be there. You check us out, and Ada will be hopefully be interviewing some people, and I'll be there on site, and check us out definitely. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to wish all of you a very, very, very great weekend. Have a great time with your family and your friends. And again, be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. Have a great night.
Good night.
咱究竟该有共匪灭在咱的手。好酒。喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假恶丑。喝了咱的酒啊，咱的心爱的自由。喝了咱的酒啊，心头山河一声吼。喝了咱的酒啊，不灭恶党誓不休。春天一呀举酒肉，真心的共跟我走。好酒啊好酒啊好酒，70年前共匪团的战力，如今依旧撕裂在中华大地。管天管地管空气，中间还管着你的生殖器。老百姓们活的不如猪狗，人民的最后被他们统统卷走。传统文化全都化为乌有，这些洋人们难道还没受够？这帮孙子天天在搞双休，这封你的口把你思想左右，看不尽的眼泪不停的流，和谐小康社会我去你个头！喝了咱的酒啊，看破中共假恶丑。喝了咱的酒啊，咱的心爱的自由。喝了咱的酒啊，心头山河一声吼。喝了咱的酒啊，不灭恶党誓不休。春天一呀举酒肉，真心的共跟我走。好酒啊好酒啊好酒，正义将琴酒交到你的手，天南地北从此与我便是战友。我和城市走肉，抗争不分前后，传播真相不管黑夜白昼。干了10碗酒，好基友上心头，子的未来是我战斗的理由。舍去爱恨情仇，我去放在脑后，为自由灭中共不言不休。报了革命这碗酒，敬天敬地敬战友，新中国联邦人永不为奴，跟我走。神仙阳谷县大县，咱走走看。